we have to shift from seeing these people as people to be served as friends to embrace. And not just that, but they're a vital part of the body of Christ who have gifts to offer and contribute and are part of our interdependence as a community to fill out what God is doing among us.
I'm Trisha Taylor, and this is the Leader's Journey podcast. And today we get to explore a part of life and leadership that we don't always make time for, that we don't always know exactly how to talk about. And that is how we think about, relate to, include, and even more than include people with disabilities, those whose disabilities are lifelong. And I think I also want to stop and say just the reality that almost all of us at some time or another in our lives will find ourselves grappling with disability in one way or another. So this is not for them, this is for us. But we also want to think about how we're creating systems that work for all of us. And so back in November of 2023, we had a conversation with Ann Cansfield about leadership and neurodivergence, and we just barely scratched the surface of that. And we are just going to barely scratch the surface again. But toward that end, I am really, really glad to have Mac McCarthy and Josie McCarthy here for this conversation. So Mac is the lead pastor at Crosspoint Community Church in the suburbs of Milwaukee. If you're a listener to this podcast, you already know Mac. He is on our team at the Leader's Journey and is a coach and a consultant and all the things. And we love having Mac on the podcast. And this time he brought Josie, and this is just so much fun. Josie is a nurse ICU nurse for like 18 years, something like that. Now I'm a recovery nurse after day surgery. I'm just really excited to have both of you here. And so welcome. And
Thanks, Trisha. It's good to be
Yeah,
here.
thank you.
Yeah, Josie is the special edition. You guys are in for a treat.
Well, what I love is that I didn't really know Josie till just fairly recently. And now I want to have this conversation, and it would be fun to just sit around and talk. So
Yes, absolutely.
we had a great time. But this is a conversation that comes out of your own story. We've been talking about it for a little while. So I kind of just want to turn things over to you and ask you to tell us why are we having this conversation right now with you?
Yeah. Well, I can kind of start us out. Mac and I have a son with Down syndrome. Griffin is 10 years old. And I guess we'll just start with our story. We did not find out that Griffin had Down syndrome until the day he was born. But what kind of makes part of our story a little bit more intense is that leading up to his birth, the year before, Mac and I experienced a miscarriage. And it was painful, both physically and emotionally. So when the doctor gave us the clearance that we could start trying to have kids again, and Griffin is our third son. So when we got the clearance, it was very difficult, and I was pretty anxious. So I began to pray, before we even conceived him. I began to pray through every body system from head to toe that we would have a healthy child. And I even specifically prayed against any genetic abnormalities. Being a nurse, I got pretty crazy with this, even praying through every body system. So it was a great pregnancy, with really nothing out of the ordinary. We chose not to have any genetic testing because we had 2 healthy children already. And on, a couple weeks before his due date, I was 36 and a half weeks, I went into a fast and furious labor. And my water broke at home. So we get to the hospital, and it was only a couple hours in length total. And it was pretty intense. because his heart rate was decelerating and I was on my hands and knees with 100% oxygen. And I definitely was minutes away from having an emergency C-section, but thankfully he was born naturally. And the minute he was laid on my chest, I knew something was wrong. He flopped on my chest, like didn't have any tone in his muscles. And so I'll kind of hand it over to Mac to describe how that was for him.
Yeah, I don't think that right after he was born, I wouldn't say I was in the framework like something's clearly wrong and we need to figure it out. It was more after we had received the diagnosis that I began to like, oh, that's what I was noticing there. But my mom and our boys came to visit. I think my dad was out of town, and so we got to visit. And pretty much right after our immediate family left, I remember Josie was holding Griffin sitting in on the bed, and I was standing next to her. And a team of doctors and nurses came in and sort of surrounded us, and they had very serious looks on their faces. And they just kind of came out with it. They said, we were noticing, characteristics consistent with Down syndrome. And there's really nothing that prepares you for that kind of a moment. It's still, when I think about it, felt really surreal. I remember Josie looking down at Griffin and then looking up at me with tears in her eyes. I remember the room sort of, it got cloudy almost. Like they're still talking, they're still saying things, and I'm just kind of standing there. And the first couple of weeks were a major blur. But I do remember a few things. I remember crying a lot, which was interesting because I'm not a big crier. I remember that first night, I didn't sleep much. But the one time I fell asleep, I had a really unusual experience. It was, I sort of like re-encountered or had a dream of all the different people that had Down syndrome I had met in my life. So a guy named Jerry, I remember from when I was a kid, and I had a professor in grad school whose daughter had Down syndrome. And it was almost like my brain had kept a file of like all these experiences and opened it up. And I woke up like in a panic, just in a sweat, breathing really heavily. And I just remember really being flooded with anxiety and uncertainties. I remember thinking, I'm not a patient person. This is going to require a lot of patience. There's some dads who crush it with the toddler stage. I didn't consider myself to be one of them. Now I have a child who might be a toddler for the rest of his life. I'm an incredibly independent person. Now I have a child who might be dependent his entire life. How are we going to afford this? I'm a pastor. Will we ever be empty nesters? I was really looking forward to that stage, What will Griffin be like? And I just remember, really feeling overwhelmed, but also noticing that when I just simply held Griffin and looked at him and embraced him, a lot of those anxieties and fears dissipated. It was almost as if the stories I was telling myself about disability began to fade as I just became present to it. And of course, that was 10 years ago, and I would tell you it's complicated. Our lives have been incredibly enriched by Griffin. He's one of the greatest gifts in my life. We laugh harder than we've ever laughed before. Our joy is multiplied. Our love has been refined, apart from, achievement or athletic ability or good looks. And my goodness, there's not a day that goes by where we're not dealing with significant challenges and complications of having a son with a disability. He's got, so many doctors, so many PT, so much going on all the time, behavioral issues, all of it, that it's really hard too. And we have to live in that tension.
Yes. Yeah, and I would add it. We both went on our own journeys of accepting his diagnosis of Down syndrome. And for me, right after he was born, they do a blood test called a FISH assay. And it's about 5 days from when they take the blood to when they get the results back. And in my heart, I was like, well, I know God has the power to heal this. So even if Griffin does have Down syndrome, I know within 5 days, he also may not. And so I really had my heart set on that in 5 days, even though he might have it now, God will heal him from Down syndrome. And when the results came back positive, I was devastated. I was like, I had the faith. I have faith, and Mac has faith. Why hasn't he been healed from this? So over the course of the following 9 months, I went through, therapy, a lot of things, and ultimately heard from God and that he is a gift. And this led to being able to accept him. But it was really a struggle for me. And I know that we each kind of had our own journey on it, but it is definitely, I never anticipated being part of this club that we now find ourselves in, the Disability Club, which I didn't want to be part of it. I didn't, but here we are.
Yeah, you didn't apply to join. And
No.
It's clear that both of you were in a grieving process, understandably. And I think of grief as just that natural thing we go through to clear out space for reality. And so it sounds like in different ways, y'all were both doing that. And it seems like both of you came to a place, maybe early, maybe later, where it was just a sense of this is what we have now.
Yes.
And the easy parts, the hard parts, the parts that feel like blessing, the parts that maybe are blessing but don't feel like it, and then all the other things and all of that mixed up together.
Yeah.
You mentioned, Josie, that your first faith go-to was God heal him. I mean, absolutely understandable.
Yeah.
And then at some point, y'all had to move toward something like, how do we understand where Jesus is?
Yes.
In this story. And both our story, and then I know you also think about that in terms of your work now being in the, as you said it, in the club, and figuring out where Jesus is in that part of the story as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Josie had more work theologically to do to understand Griffin's diagnosis in light of God's agency. And I had done a lot of work before then in both college and grad school, just theologically. And so I don't feel like I really, I had a framework for understanding that this happens, and now we're part of that. And for me, it didn't have a sort of a disruptive dynamic in terms of understanding God or how God was at work as it did for Josie. But I think watching Josie and giving her permission to be where she was and encouraging honesty was an important part of her journey. And I think that when we come to God honestly and in our frustration, in our anger, God often meets us there and is very gracious. I remember a particular morning, we do like pancake breakfast on Saturday mornings, and we were cleaning up and there was a song playing on our, on our podcast or whatever, on our whatever we were listening to. And, Yep. And the refrain on the song, it was a John Mark McMillan song, and it talked about how God was good. And Josie was standing over the sink and sort of like dropped a plate more forcefully than it was kind of like startling. And she's like, yeah, right. God is good. Then why didn't he answer my prayer?
Yeah. Yeah.
And as a pastor in that moment and a husband, I was kind of like smiling, like we're doing it. Like we're getting honest.
We are.
But it was this clear moment where she was like, I was like, that's it. Like, that's it. You're getting at this core question you have, and God is big enough to sit with that question with you. And I think God met her in a way that was completely reframed things.
Josie, what was that moment at the sink like for you?
It was, honestly, I was surprised by Mac's response, as you were, Trisha. I really, what it did is it gave me freedom to be where I was, permission to be where I was, so that I could really reckon with our reality. And I think my deep-seated belief was, if you if you are faithful to God, if you do all the right things, although I wouldn't have said this out loud, but this was my core belief, then God will, respond in faithfulness to you, and you will get what you ask for. Almost like a genie in a bottle. If you do things the right way and ask for the right things, then they'll be granted to you. And I was a rule follower. I did everything correct in my pregnancy. I didn't have lunch meat, and I didn't, like all the little tiny nuances that no one ever pays attention to. I followed the rules, and then I prayed with faith. And so I think it really shattered me in a way that this could happen to me despite having all of my ducks in a row and being prepared, for bad things to happen by praying against them. And so in that moment, I think the love and compassion that Mac gave to me was sort of a picture of how Jesus is towards us, in that he can handle my honesty, and that is not the issue. The issue is me accepting where I really am, and accepting that is how I operate, and letting God transform me in that space.
And so both of you had to start thinking about, so how does Jesus see Griffin? And then over time, how does Jesus see individuals with disabilities? And maybe more generally, and what does that have to do with us?
It kind of starts going back to that moment in the delivery room a few hours after Griffin was born. I was holding Griffin, and this team of doctors and nurses came in, and they said to Mac, "You might want to sit down for this." And I was holding Griffin, and I felt like this incredible weight in him. Like I have a huge, he was only 6 pounds, but it felt like a 50-pound weight on my lap. And when they said he has every characteristic of having Down syndrome, this was a pediatrician that had been our other boys' pediatricians. We had known him for years and years, and he was nearing retirement. And I looked at him and I said, "Dr. Ullery, you are wrong. My son's perfect." But at the same time, I knew I couldn't ignore the physical symptoms and signs that Griffin was exhibiting. And so in that moment, it was like my gut was telling me, no, he's right. And it's this huge weight that's now been given to you, a huge burden now that's been given to you. It is in the days after his birth, they give you so much information that's overwhelming. He's more at risk for diabetes and cancer and heart disease. And, the list is like a mile long. And so all of a sudden I go from having, just having this transition of my third son being born to, oh, and you're going to have a child who is dependent on you for your whole life. So in my mind, the world as I knew it was over. Like my life was over. And so for months, I asked God to speak to me about this, about my disappointment, about my frustration, about his agency in it. If you are good, why did this happen to me? And I would try time and time again to hear from him, and nothing. I just felt radio silence. I felt all alone. And so it was out of that this moment came in the kitchen at the sink when I said, well, God isn't good. And it was honestly like an unconscious thought. I don't know that I really thought that, but it was just sort of under my breath, and it kind of revealed this moment. So after that, I was able to specifically pray, like, God, what do you want me to know about this belief that I have that you really aren't good, because you gave me a son with a disability? And I was nursing him. It was like a few weeks later after the sink moment. I was nursing him in his rocker in his room. And I looked down at his hand, and there's many signs of Down syndrome. One of them is there's a line. Like if you look at the palm of your hand, there's lines, like creases in your hand. And our creases in our hands don't go across the whole length of our palm, but his does. And I looked down at this crease that went across his entire palm, this sign that, yes, he's different. He has a disability. And this is one of the confirming signs of it. And all of a sudden, in that moment, I felt this flood of emotion. I felt warm inside, and I felt like the Lord was speaking to me saying, but look at what I've given you. Like, this is my gift to you, and you get to unwrap him, for the rest of your life. Like, you get to peel back the layers and find out who he is and how he operates. And his life is a gift. And in all your prayers, I answered them because you asked me for a healthy child, and he's healthy. And I preserved his life. The statistics of Down syndrome and a fetus, in utero, making it to birth for someone who has trisomy 21 is like 98% don't make it. They miscarry. So the fact, and I knew these statistics, and so God was bringing this to mind, like, this is the 2% that make it. And I did answer your prayer in preserving his life, and he's my gift to you. So it spoke to all the things, all the questions that I had in that moment. And that was a big turning point for me.
Yeah, and I got to observe that turning point. I mean, from perceiving Griffin as an unanswered prayer that reflects God's sort of negligence or lack of care, now all of a sudden going, whoa, 98% of infants who are conceived who have Down syndrome don't make it, and God preserved his life. And this is a sign of his love and care. That just reframes how you now look at Griffin in our daily life, to go, this is an answered prayer, actually not an unanswered one. And of course, for me, I began to notice, and this is complicated because as you raise a child with disability, you're in a world with people who have very different perspectives and ways of relating to those who have disabilities. And one of the things that I really had fun doing was just noticing how Jesus related to those who had disabilities. I mean, if you read through, at one point, I just read through the Gospels with the lens of disability. And I noticed that it started with Jesus's eyes over and over, not just with those with disabilities, but the Gospel writers note how Jesus saw. Jesus saw their faith. He saw that woman weeping. He saw the crowd around him. He saw and moved in. Like, he over and over, they're making notations about Jesus's eyes, his perception, who he's noticing and how he's relating. And I noticed that Jesus, after seeing people and in a way that affirmed their humanity and dignity and that they're image bearers of God, he often did things that were disruptive to the people around him, those who weren't able to see individuals in light of their dignity and humanity. There's accounts where the disciples were trying to quiet or push aside someone who was disabled, and Jesus would stop and attend to them, and in a way turn the entire value system upside down. And so that's something I've become increasingly passionate about, is learning how to see individuals who have disabilities as gifts, as image bearers, treating them with dignity and respect, but also, I kind of have a prophetic edge, being a force of disruption in a culture where we still have a long ways to go.
Yeah. And we do have a long ways to go. I mean, one of the things I think that you've said beginning in the delivery room is that this whole experience surfaced your own mental models about what it would be like to have a child with disabilities, your own core assumptions. But Griffin's presence in the world challenges all of our mental models about that. And
it's almost like we needed to have it took Griffin to heal our own sight.
Yeah.
And, of the 30 some miracles recorded in the Gospels, almost 1/4 of them are healings of sight. And what I'm suggesting is I think all of us need to have our vision corrected. We need our sight restored to be able to see the way that God sees. And I do want to orient with a lot of grace and compassion, because for us, it took conceiving and raising a child with a disability, and not everybody, I definitely wouldn't be where I am now without having Griffin. So,
Yeah.
Yep.
so if you hear me, I'm going, hey, I have a passion for this. There's an edge to it.
Mhm.
I can get feisty about it. And I recognize that I wouldn't be where I am without the unique opportunity to have a child with a disability.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think about, the disciples who come to Jesus and say, who sinned, this blind man or his parents?
Mhm.
And, that exposes that mental model. And in
Mhm.
that culture of maybe ritual purity and that sort of thing, that would have been so important. It seems like in our culture, what gets exposed often is um, our addiction to efficiency and
Mhm.
to excellence and
Yes.
past cultures didn't even have the shot at perfectionism that we have
Mhm.
now.
Yeah.
And that's just built into our Western, I'm going to say US culture, even into our Christian culture, right? That God is there to make sure that I get all the good things that are coming to me. Um and not the bad, I'm putting that in quotes, the
Yeah.
bad ones.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I can imagine maybe one of our listeners hearing what you said about, the 2% and thinking, oh, I can't wait to just go tell someone who's going through this. Oh, this is the 2%. This is the gift,
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
a time when that would be very premature or where there would
Yeah.
be more about, if I were to say that to someone, it would be much more about my anxiety about
Yes.
them facing
Absolutely.
the, the future that they're imagining or that I'm imagining for them than it is about offering anything helpful to them. And so,
Yeah, I would just jump on that for a moment and say
okay.
one of the things that made our acceptance or adapting to our new reality more
Mhm.
challenging and not less was absorbing well-intentioned
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
using cliches and positive platitudes in a way that actually spiritually bypassed. I think you're pressing on that, Trisha, which is to say, hey, be careful about, and this applies more broadly than just people who have maybe are absorbing news of a child with a disability or whatever. I notice this in as a pastor, anytime someone who's going through grief,
Mhm.
we're often like Job's friends.
Yeah.
We're anxious about what they're
Mhm.
experiencing, and so we rush in and say things
Yeah.
that are less than helpful and more designed to comfort us.
Yeah. Almost like you have to have an explanation to relieve
Yeah.
your own anxiety. And so you're offering the explanation to that person while bypassing just sitting and being present to them and listening to how they're feeling and how they're doing.
And trusting that the Spirit will have the moment
Mhm.
with them that the Spirit had with you, Josie,
Yeah.
and with Mac at
Exactly.
different times in different ways.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, I know that you've named some of those things that happen that get in the way of us really being helpful and actually become unhelpful. I
Uh-huh.
want you to tell us what some of those things are so that we can, um, grapple with that ourselves. And
Mhm.
then I'm going to push back just a little bit. How's
All
that?
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me I'll name some pitfalls I've noticed. And this I want to be careful. This is our story. So I can only see things from where I sit in light of our experience with Griffin. There are lots of disabilities. There's lots of different experiences and stories. So I want to acknowledge that. But as we've raised Griffin for the last 10 years and watched how people interact with him and some of the challenges he's experienced and we've experienced as his parents, I have noticed a handful of pitfalls that I would encourage people to avoid.
Okay.
Okay. And the first one, I think most of our listeners would agree with, but I don't know if they would see how it still plays out, and that is prejudice.
Mhm.
So we do live in a culture where inclusion, thank goodness, is sort of a common cultural value now.
Mhm.
And that's wonderful. Just 50 to 60 years ago, most individuals with Down syndrome or other disabilities were simply institutionalized.
Yep.
And so there's been a lot of progress that we're deeply grateful and thankful for in creating environments that prioritize inclusion. However, I think sometimes people think because they have the value, it's not happening anymore. Like prejudice isn't a thing anymore. We've sort of arrived. And in fact, we still encounter instances like that with a fair degree of frequency.
Yeah. So Griffin is going to middle school this coming year. And part of middle school is that you get to choose what music you're going to do. And he has been in music therapy since he was 3. So really for a long time, I've been like, yes, percussion is his thing. He loves the drums, and he's been playing the drums with his music therapist faithfully every single week for years and years. So when it came for the tryouts for band, I kind of got ahead of it. I called the school. I made sure, like, yes, we can accommodate you. We can try out for band. And when I got there, there was a music teacher that wasn't from the specific school. She was part of the district, but not part of the specific school that Griffin will be attending. And I think she got a little bit caught off guard as far as she wasn't prepared for when Griffin came into the room. So the way it was that you waited in line until your time, and then the band teacher takes you and maybe one other student and works with you to see how you are adapting to percussion. So she'll go through some rhythms and some songs and see if you can rat-a-tat-tat along with her. And when she was finishing up, Griffin and I were sitting there, and he has a lot of sensory issues. So he's spinning beads while he's waiting, and he's listening to Spotify on my phone and looking at pictures and stimming out as he does. And she looked over, and I said, yes, this is Griffin. He's going to be in 5th grade next year. And with all the other students, she took them over and worked with them. With Griffin, she sat and talked to me. And when we were done talking, she was ready to move on to the next students. And so I kind of stopped her and I said, well, I think he would like to try, the instrument. And so I initiated it. I took him over to the drum, and he doesn't take well to new situations. And so immediately he was whining and kind of done. He says, all done, and sitting on the floor. And for maybe 10 seconds, she attempted to kind of and after she realized that it wasn't going to work in her weak attempt, she bypassed him and moved on to other students. And so in that moment, I kind of made the quick decision, I'm going to let him have an opportunity here. Like he's not going to get into the drums and understand what this is about unless I'm here for, a portion of time so that he can actually adapt to this new environment. And he ended up having a fantastic time. And she was across the room with other students. We were making a total ruckus. And he ended up having an absolute blast. But I walked out of that in tears because I felt like she did not take the time and attention it required to really give him a shot. And she just moved on to kids who were able to perform in the way that she wanted them to.
Yeah, and this is where the justice lens comes in. When I wasn't at the appointment, but I heard about it, and so we quickly organized a meeting with higher ups to say, hey, this is what we just experienced. Here's what that is, and here's what we want for our son. And we're grateful they responded. That makes sense.
And so I'm thinking about in the places where we are leading, where we are, helping to shape systems, that reminder, whatever it ends up looking like, that reminder that, how did you say it? To put a person's humanity, their personhood before the disability, as we're taking in the whole variety of information about a person.
Yes.
To remember that comes first.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, the offside of this, so if one pitfall is sort of prejudice, the flip side, or on the other end of the spectrum, I would say, would be almost like a disability blindness. So there's some people who say, that I've noticed, and we've had experiences where it's like they know, prejudice is wrong, but it's almost like, let's get to this place where we don't even see, for instance, the disability itself. We only see that they're created in God's image and their humanity and dignity. So we've had instances where we're standing there, with other kids who are in Griffin's class, and the parents will say, when I see Griffin, I don't see him different than anyone else. I see him just like any other kid. And at first you're just kind of like, you kind of cock your head and you're like, you what? Like, well, clearly he's different. Like, this is just, it's kind of comical, but then you realize, oh, there's actually more to it, that like that there's a harm and hurt that does. Because if you're not able to see the Griffin's disability, you're also not able to be present to the unique challenges and hardships he experiences day to day, and maybe the challenges and difficulties we experience as his parents or as a family. In other words, if you're not able to see his disability, then you're sort of ignoring reality, right?
Yeah, and you can't really see him as the unique individual that he is.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And so part of my conviction and if people are willing to learn alongside us, I say, look, to truly see Griffin, you need to see his humanity and dignity and to learn how to honor that. But you also need to learn to see his disability and how that shows up, and some of the challenges that come with it.
Yeah.
Because I'm guessing if I don't see his disability and then I'm interacting with him in whatever setting and his disability just becomes very glaringly obvious, I think I would run away. I wouldn't be able to stay engaged.
Yep.
Because I wouldn't be able to hold on to that idea that, well, I don't see this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another example where this was hurtful and harmful, again, was just recently. We have a lot of IEP meetings because Griffin is jumping from elementary school to middle school. And in the first round of IEP meetings, we walk Griffin to school. He's close to our elementary school, but the middle school is not close. And there's a bus that's available for individuals with disabilities to prioritize their safety, and because they can't walk to the bus stop. And so our hope and expectation was that would be extended to him. And for whatever reason, it was not written into the IEPs. So we had to have a second set of IEP meetings just addressing the bus. And the head learning strategist came. And again, I'm going to summarize because I wasn't at this one. Josie was. But as it was recounted to me, this woman was very much wanting to try to see if we could just put Griffin on the normal bus. And in addition to Down syndrome, we're fairly confident that Griffin has autism. So he has a lot of sensory issues. He gets overwhelmed, especially when there's chaos around him or unpredictable noises and things of that sort. And we're just kind of going, no, that's not safe for him. He could show up at school and be completely dysregulated just because of the bus ride. This isn't a good idea. And she went on a long rant about how this is her vision. If kids take the special bus, everybody's going to see that they're special. And if every kid could just ride the normal bus, then everybody would be normal and see them normally. And that's an example where I was like, nope, see, you're actually compromising his safety. We're not prioritizing what's best for Griffin, that he needs a certain ride to school. Yeah. And I don't want everybody to see him normal because he's quote unquote normal. That's doing bad work. So your vision is rooted in a disability blindness that's harmful.
Because we're not saying that everyone is the same.
No.
We're saying that everyone is valuable.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's not this. Those are different things. But
Right.
I can say that I believe that Griffin is valuable, but still not really want to do life with him.
Yes.
Not want to have a full engagement with him.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's the third pitfall I would name. Wisconsin is amazing with all of its programs to support, and it's one of the best in the country.
Yeah.
And there's also some nonprofits in our community that exist to support individuals with disabilities that are doing incredible work. So in no way am I wanting to slight those organizations and the opportunities they're providing for people to serve a community that's often overlooked. Having acknowledged all of that, however, I've noticed that there is a way of being involved in serving through programs to support the community of those who are disabled that's very much on my own terms. I can sort of swoop in and give of my time and energy. And I even feel good about it.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I get some warm fuzzies about it. But it's in a very confined and controlled space. And then I can leave and go out and live my life.
Yeah.
People will serve in programs in ways that make them feel good. But they're not necessarily like creating space in their life to befriend individuals with disabilities, which is
Mhm.
much more inconvenient.
Yes.
The way I'd get at that is there's a lot of people who would help Griffin for a moment, but Griffin has very few friends.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
And when we go back to Jesus, I don't think he just had a moment where he served someone with a disability to make a difference. He actually invited that and challenged the community around him to see this individual differently, such that they're now included in, they're part of the community.
Yes.
Just vision for Griffin, not just being included in general, but
Mhm.
belonging.
Yeah.
What do you see about that? What do you hope for?
Yeah, I think it's hard because there's some level of reciprocity that has to happen in a relationship for it to be a true friendship. And that's part of one of the barriers is that Griffin often doesn't operate on anyone's terms but his own. Like he kind of forces you to meet him where he's at, and he's incapable of meeting other people where he's at. So there are barriers to this. But I think one of the biggest things that Mac named is that most people want to meet him on their own terms. They want a set of time or a chunk of time. They're willing to give this, but not that. And if you really want to enter into a relationship with him, you kind of have to take the good and the bad and the ugly. You kind of have to go beyond maybe your comfort zone of what you're willing to do.
Yeah, I think the shift is from pity to presence.
Yeah.
I think we actually need to move beyond inclusion to a place of belonging. We have to shift from seeing these people as people to be served as friends to embrace.
Mm-hmm.
And not just that, but they're a vital part of the body of Christ who have gifts to offer and contribute and are part of our interdependence as a community to fill out what God is doing among us.
Mm-hmm.
Just as every other person has received the power of the Spirit, individuals with disabilities have the power of the Spirit, are activated to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I'm trying to name is inclusion often doesn't create that interdependence, even though it may not be 50-50 in terms of reciprocity.
Mm-hmm.
There can be a sense of mutuality and relationship, even though the table may always be tilted a little bit to go, you need assistance, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does that make
I think
sense?
perhaps one of the biggest pictures that Mac and I have gotten of this, like the person that comes to mind that who's gotten closest to it is one of Griffin's aides at school. Her name is Mrs. Allen, and she is a wonderful human. And the way that she interacts with him is with lots of dignity. And she will get on his level, and she will, kind of wait for him to speak first. And she is very gracious to him and always is so grateful for how much he teaches her. She's constantly telling me, like, I learned so much from Griffin. I'm so grateful. He's such a gift. And the way that she just exudes love in that way and compassion is something that is very rare for me to see. And so some people do get it right. And it really is a gift to us as parents, because you kind of have that moment where you're like, oh, like this person really sees Griffin the way I see him, or the way Jesus sees him, like for the gift that he is. And he may not meet them where they want him to meet him, but he does have a lot to offer. And it's in the way of love and millions of kisses and,
Right.
singing songs and saying rhymes. I mean, it's in his own way, but he has a lot to give that if you stop for a minute and get on his level and see him for who he is, that you get a lot in return.
Okay. I told you that I was going to push back.
Yep.
And I think we're going to need a part 2. I think that we're going to need to keep this conversation going, because here's some of the things that I want to ask. And I want us to come back and finish this part of the conversation. Because I can hear some of our listeners who are listening to this not as parents, but as leaders. I'm going to say I can hear them because I've heard this in my own head. Okay. I can hear them saying, yes, and I am already so tired, and it is already so hard to keep people coming to our church with even the least kind of distraction. And the people that are coming to church are consumers, and they're not looking for this. And I can imagine people saying, I want to do what you're saying, but I know I've gotten it wrong because I've done some of the things that you've called out. And so now I just want to go crawl in a hole and not do this anymore. I can imagine, I have heard leaders say, I have this family, they have a child or children with disabilities, and none of the small groups want them.
Mhm.
And I don't know what to do about that.
Mm-hmm.
Or I want to take this on, and I have no idea how to go about that in a way that doesn't just completely burn me out.
Yeah.
And maybe kind of when they see the family coming, think what you thought at the very beginning, is this really a gift? Is this a gift to our congregation, or is this just going to be a challenge? And those are all really hard questions. And they're questions that I know people are grappling with. I hope they're still listening and would be willing to have a really challenging conversation about that. Could we
Yeah.
come back and do that?
100%.
Yeah.
Like,
And I
yeah.
would say if someone is sitting there feeling the weight of this conversation,
As a leader or as a member of a group,
that's right.
saying, I want what you're describing, and I feel totally overwhelmed by it.
Yeah. The first thing I would say is be kind to yourself.
Okay. So let's ask everyone to be kind to themselves.
Yep.
And to come back for part 2.
Yep.
Where I want us to get really gritty about this.
Yep.
I mean, I want us to address some of those things. People know that this podcast is not a shaming podcast, but that we will get really gritty about how do we think about that on an organizational level.
Yes, I will do that.
Absolutely.
And I want to maybe also put a bookmark around some of the newer developments in what's called disability theology.
Okay.
And I think that will also expose on the organization level. The reason why these are connected is there's also some other things we need to be aware of.
Okay.
As we start to press into the complications. So
Yes. And you will bring all that to us, and we will put that in our show notes and also have a real conversation. But for now, I want to thank you for having part 1 of this conversation.
Yeah.
I know people's wheels are turning. I know they're feeling challenged, but also challenged in a good way. I want what Mac and Josie are describing. So let me say, first of all, y'all have some blog posts, and so do other members of our team, that will be coming up around the time that you're able to listen to this podcast. And then also we are doing Zoom dialogues every month where we are choosing something to talk about. We're coming together on Zoom. This is not a webinar where you listen to someone talk. It is literally a dialogue. And Mac and Josie are going to be with us for this Zoom dialogue on Thursday, July 24th at 1 p.m. That's 1 p.m. Central Time. I know our listeners, y'all are all over the world, so do your own math. But that would be Central Daylight Time. If you want to get in touch with Mac or Josie, you can do that through the website, theleadersjourney.us, and just use the Contact Us button, and we will facilitate that. For now, I'm going to say take good care, and we will see you next time.